Hi, everybody. I want to thank you again for coming out to one of our podcasts. Today, we're discussing, well, the topic is, or at least the title, it's a modular world. And how do you build the modern enterprise from an IT and data perspective through a modular approach? And what brought this to mind was that, the built world is all about modular these days. And so, anyway, before I go much further, today we have with us Shaili Modi, as always. I'm Joe Giegerich. I'm the founder and CEO of ProjectReady. But Aarni and Salla, if you could introduce yourselves.
Yes, thanks. My name is Aarni Heiskanen. I'm originally an architect, a software developer, and a management consultant. And nowadays, I do more like communication projects for my clients. And I'm also a blogger and podcaster myself. I've been doing that for over 11 years. And I'm from Helsinki, Finland, by the way.
And I'm Salla Eckhardt. I'm a senior vice president at OAC Services in Seattle, Washington, United States. And I'm originally from Finland, like Aarni is, and also an architect with my background. But my career has been focusing on industry innovation and rather than design and engineering per se. I'm super excited to be on this podcast today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, always. And I believe we met you, Aarni, through Salla back in the day.
Yeah, I don't know. Salla knows everybody. Yes.
Yeah, there's a point to that. Well, it's because the reputation precedes. All right. So I'll tee this up a little bit more, and then I'm going to ask either and both of you to, sort of describe modular construction. Actually, why don't we start there? Why don't you each take a pass at what modular construction is in the formal sense?
Well, if I start first, modular construction to me is a systematic way of designing, planning, designing, building, and also maintaining the end product, which is a building. And of course, it requires a lot of planning and the idea is to make something repeatable. And when you make something repeatable, you can develop it like as any product, like a phone, smartphone, for example. But you can also get a lot of efficiencies from that because you're prone to standardize things, and we have several good examples of modular construction. Here in Finland, we have been doing it for quite some time, since the 1960s, but also it's gaining popularity globally right now. So I think that, to me, modular construction is about systematization and simplification of the process and making it more predictable.
And Salla?
Arnie nailed it. But for me, modular and volumetric are both industrial construction in what it provides for the developers and for people that are on the projects together is that everything is built in factory conditions rather than in the actual like under the sun, under the wind and rain conditions. And that way we can actually productize this space, and that pushes us into what Amy Marks has been talking about in productization. And overall, from design and engineering perspective, modular construction enables us to standardize the geometry and the size of the module. So that way it's easier to also plan for the supply chain and logistics and bring efficiencies for the entire project team. And from real estate owner perspective and facility management perspective, modular enables to plan ahead in operations and also in the next cycle of capex investments. So it overall makes things much easier to manage for everyone.
And it componentizes. Is that a fair way to end cap that? Right? You have rooms, HVAC. I mean, it's I'll simplify, but it's Lego-like. And to bring it all the way through with what you guys said, it starts from that inception. What are going to be the components? how we're going to assemble it with the most efficiency, how do we repeat it in forward projects, and how do we maintain it post in a way that's not unduly impactful to the cost of the operation of that facility or building or asset.
That's beautifully said. Makes everything easy because you don't have to try to control a bigger entity than what actually needs to be managed at a single point in time. So you nailed it, Gigs. Thank you.
No, sure. It's because I just talk to smart people and repeat what they say. So it works out great. And so, all right. So to move this along, what I found really very interesting. So what we do is we create an integrated data environment. And, the more I would read, like posts from you guys online and the like, it struck me that that paradigm is sort of universal in modernity. It even goes down to object-oriented programming, right? There are modules, there's more rapid fire. I mean, if you talk about that, Shaili, from a development perspective, again, it's kind of modular based. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it nicely brings it together where the technology behind AEC, where again, there are so many different connecting pieces, and it doesn't matter if they are all coming from different places. We need to make sure that it's all scalable in a way that when it comes together at the project level, at the end user level, it kind of doesn't matter where all of these different modules are coming from. And we are able to work on a project as a whole. So it needs to be seamless that way. Doesn't matter what systems are used, where the data is coming from. I think that architecture where things are standardized, that's where it all comes together.
Right. And so, the axe that I grind is that, looking at, I refer to old school, not in a good way, as I would say, monolithic dev, as I refer to it. So you'll have an enterprise, it will adopt one system primarily for, let's say, project accounting. That manufacturer, or supplier of software, then adds on a whole bunch of other stuff to their stack that may or may not be the best of breed. And now the notion of a CDE is like, it's all underneath one roof. But the reality inside the AEC, within the enterprise itself, is that you're going to be using different systems on different projects in-house, and then as you interact with vendors and owners who will dictate their own systems. So if you have a prescriptive method to looking at what it is for a project from the inception of, how you're going to handle NDAs, how you're going to handle all that content, all the data that flows when the project is awarded and lit up, that as you change modules, if you will, if you look at accounting and document management systems and CAD management systems as modules, because they're different manufacturers, right? That as you approach a project, you want that simple, repeatable standard pulling together components that are off the shelf. And that's the tie back for me on where the built world is right now. And what I've just seen it's emerging, but it's a deficit of approach as it relates to enterprise computing and projects. And Salla, I know when you were at Microsoft and the like, you looked at a lot of different software solutions. So any comments or pick up on what I just said?
Yeah, a very valid point. And from the perspective of kind of being swamped in the amount of software that currently is available for the AECO industry, just like Shaili said, that we need to have very frictionless experience for the end users to support their work and really lean in with digital platforms. And why I'm pro platforms is that it enables people to tap into the data source rather than input it again into the software that they use in their own organizations. So it's really related to synchronizing the data and harmonizing the data rather than repeatedly inputting the data into various software systems and spending a lot of time and resources in doing that. So I'm very, very pro frictionless and data synchronization.
Which, in order to do that, in our experience, is you have to have a view of those systems as modules, not as this will fix everything for everybody in the company. And I would even go further because, when we go in and we have prospects and we're discussing project ready, they go, oh, we're going to switch from, I don't know, Dynamics to Deltek as a back end or, for accounting, or they're going to go, from Procore to ACC or whatever it may be. And the the whole place comes to a grinding halt. And the notion that, you change your ERP system and now every other department can't do their job, I think is one of the great risks of not proactively looking at your enterprise as a series of modules that, to your point, Salla, have to have frictionless interaction. Doesn't mean pulling people out of the applications of their choice. It just means that from an enterprise planning and design perspective, ripping out, as I put it, like your HVAC system in a building shouldn't shut off the elevator. And Shaili, do you see that kind of like quandary, or what's a better word for it? That viewpoint in the industry that there's too much obsession with one platform versus another.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of the different platforms that we integrate to, that's where they are trying to head, where they are kind of leading that everything happens in one platform. But we see that all the time, where for projects there are external people and vendors coming in. There is always a variety of systems that users work with. And definitely what Salla said, we've seen that so many times, where there is so much work going into things that they need to do. Again, there is an RFI in Procore, they have to download all of it and manually input it in another system. There are documents all over the place in so many different systems that as end users, it becomes very difficult, where if you're only living in SharePoint or living in Procore, you have to kind of go to so many different places to get everything that you need for the project. So I think while all of these systems try to do everything, I think at a project level, definitely there are so many systems and things in play that as an end user, there is a lot of repetitive work and manual efforts going into just bringing it all together.
Yeah, and not to be completely all over the place on it. I mean, you do want to narrow the number of silos, but well, to our panelists, in terms of what you've been seeing in the enterprise, what do you think of this attempt by folks to just go to one platform versus another versus the modular approach? What are the challenges, and what do you see the upside of going modular conceptually?
I think architecturally, as we are working through driving towards an integrated data environment, as we call it, there are going to be more systems in place. And that's where I guess we are kind of referring to it as modules today. You use different modules across different systems. And I definitely see a benefit of them, that you have the ability to use the best of different systems. Different companies are relying on different vendors, but then bringing it all together kind of makes that even change possible later on. As you said, if you switch from one system to another, there is no fear of just the entire project kind of disrupting. Everything is being modular. We can kind of switch systems in and out. We can bring the systems together. I think it makes it very powerful.
Yeah, Aarni and Salla, what do you see are the challenges for an enterprise to try to go versus all in on a product stack, or the approach to modular? What do you see the obstacles, and what do you see the benefits?
Well, one one thing that because I've also been a software developer, and with the one challenge we had, that was that whenever we tried to bring something that would somebody would see it as a new system again, one new system again, but the idea was to eliminate a number of other legacy systems at the same time. So there are so many legacy systems in construction companies that those are really, I think, some of the really problematic even today. So not everybody is having the latest technology. So that's one thing, that how do we manage to get those also into the game, or how can we convince people to let go of something and strip down the number of some companies have 200 different apps that they use. So
Yeah,
I see that the legacy systems and the sheer number of apps that they are using, and the reason why they have so many apps, for example, I think is that we are in a project culture and project thinking. Every project is like a new enterprise, and every new enterprise can have their different choices. And I think that the idea of modular is, in that sense, it's really good, because it doesn't totally disrupt the idea of having projects, but it also brings in the idea, the benefits of what you've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's portfolio versus project at that point, right? If you look at your enterprise as a portfolio of data you have to connect, that gives you the freedom within that project.
Yeah, portfolio management and portfolio thinking is my favorite topic, because I developed software for portfolio management, and one of the eye-opening moments for many clients was then when they saw all their systems, all their services in one portfolio. They understood what kind of a mess they were in, and they were able to then consolidate and get rid of something. So looking at portfolio level is, I think that's something that everybody should do.
Right. So enterprise platforms are a portfolio, right, that come together in projects. Salla?
Yeah, I love what Aarni said about the legacy systems, and one approach that I've taken into solving the problem is data master plan, and a lot of organizations don't have that, so they are basically working based on what tools people want to use for their perspective and their role on the project, and that leads into the situation that people have hundreds of apps and software systems, and there's a lot of dark data that nobody knows that exists. People don't have access to it. So having a data master plan and keeping it as a live document, we can actually understand better the data users and the data use cases, the data authors, and the data managers. And these are very different roles that people have in the portfolio management or the project management overall. If we start taking the approach of creating the data master plan when we are creating something new, then we can actually start managing what needs people have in terms of data and information. How are they planning on applying it into knowledge, and actually support the organizational wisdom that I've been talking about a lot. But that's the approach that I'm proposing as a solution. Data master plan. We need that.
That makes a lot of sense, because what do you want your end result to be? And then with that, stepping backwards, going, okay, so this is what we want the end result of data to be, so that we can understand. Now you have Bob, Jane, or Mary out there. They're using one of three platforms. What are their needs? And then going in that direction, figuring out then, I would argue, what systems should be in play. Because there's always a choice, right, on what systems, underlying systems that you use that may or may not be amenable to a data master plan. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And especially now that everyone is moving to cloud-based platforms and using cloud, and AI is evolving super rapidly. If people are locked into a specific ecosystem because they haven't really thought about the data master plan and how other organizations might integrate with their systems, or how might they integrate with others, then we might have roadblocks. So I like how you described it, Joe.
Yeah, and that goes back to the AI garbage in, garbage out podcast that you were on, right? That data master plan, understanding what systems, making the right choices, making sure that you're accommodating the end user, making sure there's a user experience for them to interact with, then goes a long way to supplying quality data, right? That if you want to apply AI and machine learning and analytics against, it all really does come together at the end of the day. And I think it may also pick up on it, kind of addresses the legacy problem. I'm 100% with you, Aarni. I mean, there's just this, although we've been seeing it thought, but a fair amount of intractability of, we built this system, we built it 10 years ago, it's fine as it is. No, it's an on-premise, it's not easily supported. You go in and you try to integrate to these systems and you ask them for their own product information, if you will. It's very difficult to get, right? Because the guy or gal who built it has been gone for 6 years. And so I think that's the other thing that it drives people to on those decisions is, to your point, Salla, it's the cloud, right? The cloud gives you, I just sounded like Christopher Walken, the cloud, sorry. I just realized that my Queen, I'm from the Bronx, but my New York accent came through. Yeah, it's the cloud affords APIs to do these things. And the industry, and that's a question I also have for you guys. What do you see in terms of the industry, at least in an attempt or an interest in standardizing data? Because it's great to get to APIs, but you have to have equivalent data to even connect. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, I think that the standardization question is becoming more and more important. I was just at the seminar last week, 2 days, and many people refer to data and the usefulness of data, and they refer to standards, and they say that we need structure and standards for our data, not just for interoperability across companies, but also within our own companies. So, so that's really. But by the way, I just read an interesting study from UK. It was a company that had interviewed several people who were in charge of purchasing these applications for contractors, and they said that 57% of the industry-specific software solutions that they used are not integrated with one another. So over almost 60% of their internal industry-specific solutions are not integrated internally. That's really interesting. But one of the key findings, I think, was that why are they? What is driving the organization's digital initiatives in those companies? And they said that number one thing is improving the user experience. And the second one was improving the accuracy of data sets. And the third one was data standardization. So I think those are really, they are really important. And it's something that I always, nowadays, I really like the idea of, as I wrote in my latest newsletter, the idea of starting with the user who's actually on the construction site, trying to do their jobs efficiently. If we start from watching what they're doing, how much time they're using for non-value adding activities, which nowadays is about 70% of their time, and then we should start rolling back from that. What should we do in order to serve these people, these professionals who are working on construction sites, and then you start building from that up to what kind of data you need, what kind of interoperability, and so on.
I agree with that 100%, but I would go further, right? Because the thing that I always rail on about is so hyper focus on the field, on the built asset. But it is professional services. As you put it, they're professionals. And that brute force, inefficiency, inaccurate, kill your budget, kill your quality is throughout those organizations, right? Overuse of spreadsheets, overuse of email, even those things ultimately affect the efficiency and the quality of what goes out into the field, right? Because if you're missing correspondences, if you don't know where they are, if it's not an answer that was put in time, well, there's a problem, right? So for me, it's all the end users involved in the project, not just relegated to any one particular professional, because it's a whole bunch of people doing this.
Yeah. Sure.
And we have a podcast to be released, so there's music to my ears. The user experience is the new middleware. Right. My background is as a systems integrator. And what we found early on, we specialized in SharePoint back in the day, was that if it's not easy to use, they won't use it. And so you can pull together tons of data and have charts and make queries. People need a very comfortable way to interact and contribute to that data set. I think that's tantamount.
Yeah. And one thing that is also typical for our industry is that, as I said, we are a project-oriented industry, and every project is a little bit different, even though you're making basically the same kind of apartment buildings, for example. But every project has, at least here in Finland, very typically the teams are changing. The composition of those trades is different every time. So whenever you and some companies are involved in several projects at the same time, and on every side they have a different interface to to data and the services. So if you can find some consistency across those projects, like I imagine you can do with this integrated data environment, that makes life easy for everybody, and they get they get on board much quicker than when everybody's having a different approach to every project.
Yeah, because otherwise they just have shadow IT, right? They go,
Yeah.
yay, another system. You know what? I'm going to email this to you. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of perspective, like why people want better functioning systems and better user experience is a like labor shortage. That we are coming to the point where a lot of the people that have been driving digital transformation and digitalization are actually retiring, and the end users that are going to be floating the industry forward and continuing the innovation, um, they won't be willing to use systems and solutions that are overly complicated. They will just simply abandon them or create something new. So when thinking about the data standards that you guys were talking about earlier, it really ties back to the quality of the data. So can people actually trust what they're dealing with? And then the usability of the data, that they can continue reusing and recycling the same data in various different systems rather than continue performing the non-value adding work that is just a time consumer but not really helping anyone out. And then in the future, we need better accessibility for data as well. So people can actually use the data in a way that is accessible for them, and then it's comprehensible for both human beings and the machine. So we are not only developing the systems for ourselves, human beings, but we also have to consider that in the future, our coworkers might be computer algorithms or drones or robotics, etc. So thinking about the accessibility, usability, and quality, those are important topics to already start building up readiness for.
And that's something I see pretty wanting in a lot of stuff out there. And we'll get compliments on this, right? Not just clan handing our own product, but they'll go, wow, this is really easy to use. Oh, it looks modern. And I see so many applications, even like stuff coming into market or new additions to existing platforms, where it's just a thing out of the 90s. It might, like half the front ends look like Visual Basic, right? And that is really more than problematic. Again, that's why nobody will use those systems. But if I can pivot back to the standards thing again, right? So Aarni, you had the triumvirate there, right? The standards, like, so one of sort of a question and statement, like ISO 19650 at least starts to put some standards that you can chew on. Is that fair?
Yes. I think that's something that many companies know and mention whenever we discuss these things, and of course standards are fantastic. And I think that everybody should, whenever they develop anything nowadays, they should refer to those standards. But I also see that software developers have a great responsibility, because even though we customers would like something to happen and have those standards in place, if the developers don't want to support them, that's the problem. And many companies traditionally see standards as a way as a hinder to uh, being competitive, and somehow
Quite the opposite, yeah.
yeah. So that's the eternal problem. But I would imagine nowadays that there's so much pressure from the industry that standards will prevail eventually. And of course, standardization is always a little bit behind what's actually happening in the in the commercial world. But without standards, we will be having really big trouble, and especially now, as I said, when the data and machine learning and things like that become more and more important part of our work. And I see no other alternative.
Yeah, and standards like Moore's law, right? Where you have the different slopes of, politics is behind technology, and the standards and those committees are essentially the political element of a Moore's law type of view of this.
Yeah, and also I know people who are really passionate about standards, and the problem is that they are not really good at communicating, at communication. So many times they use terms and concepts that somebody who's not involved in those circles will not understand it. So I would also I think the standards are also a communication problem or issue that you should solve, because if there are, I understand there, but many times when you talk to these standards people, they throw out all sorts of acronyms and
It's a language only understood by two twins.
yeah, that's right. So I also see that there's a lot of development to be done in communication as well.
Yeah, and standards really are in two places. Going back to, you got to get your own house in order. It's hard to hook up a hose to a fire hydrant if you can't find the hose in the house, right? There's no way you're going to plug data in. And on the larger standards level, I think that has to be driven by industry, not by institution. And there are certainly enough major players, both from manufacturers and large firms, that I think, should be able to champion those.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and to add to the standards discussions, like standards are meant to be the shared foundation, and they should be addressed like as the law for the industry that supports everyone equally, all the organizations equally, and that's why it's important that the industry is the driver, so we can get the buy-in and people can agree to it and buy into it, and developers can then start building on top of it and create the guidelines and the playbooks that then have more flexibility into the applications. But overall, standards, they ensure that whatever we are trying to plug into the various systems are actually pluggable, so that it's you're not trying to put a 3-inch hose into a 2-inch hole, etc. So that's how I'm looking at standards, that they should be addressed as the law, not as something that is a guideline or suggestion.
Yeah, and it has to be done by the UN, right? It's like a UN charter, which may not be effective. It
Exactly.
depends, not to go there, but UN charter is a very good example, and it's not going to happen between Fluor, Jacobs, and AECOM, right? Because they all have different access to grind. That's why it has to be a larger industry initiative that includes Autodesk, Trimble, and municipalities and major owners. That's the only way I think you get to it. And the other comment I always make on this is there's also a tendency in the industry to boil the ocean. Right? Like, well, what's going to be this full, comprehensive, everything to everybody for all time?
Yeah.
Wow, you're doomed if you do that, man. It's steady incremental progress.
Yeah, and one thing that is now driving very much all technology in the near future and into the long future also is sustainability and carbon footprint management, and so that is something that we will also require us to manage data more and use standards, because otherwise, how can you compare any solutions if everybody is calculating the results differently based on different kind of data?
Yeah, if you want to do like a carbon tax, for instance, which has been floated about here in the States.
Yeah.
Then there has to be a universal way to do it. And so I guess this brings me back to the modular thing. Those standards will help the industry get to a more modularized approach that will allow you to swap systems out as it's going to be. Like in our case, if it's PlanGrid or Procore, the way you interact with that data set through ProjectReady is the same, because you're not in control all the time of, say, those two platforms as a point of example. And with the advancements in APIs, with some emerging standards, I mean, Shaili, like there's always a better play for standards, but where do you see there to be some good standards in the industry? Where do you think they're lacking in terms of the way we can get things to communicate?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge right now, and what we've been talking about as well, in terms of there are all of these differences, taking even a simple RFI or a submittal across systems, it's our struggle right now because each system has a different workflow, different attributes, different properties. Earlier, we talked about syncing all of this information or even bringing all of these different data points together. The system don't have same data points right now, which makes it very difficult to bring all of these systems together. One attribute in one system means something different in another system. So I think, as like looking at it as a software developer, all of these different things need to be standardized to just make it even more seamless, because they are all making APIs available, which is good, but then it's this whole exercise to now map out all of these different properties and data points of what this means in one system versus another, and there are no real standards there. And we see this talking to like different clients daily, that they have all of these different systems and they do want to bring it together, but it's a struggle kind of trying to figure out how all of these properties are matching and how we can best bring it together where it is consistent, basically. So I think that consistency is key, and we are heading there, but it would really help if there are these standards of, okay, this kind of a workflow, it doesn't matter what system it is in, it has a consistent set of data points or properties that we can use to kind of bring it together. And basically flowing forward, that will flow into AI and all of these things that we've been talking about. It needs that consistency to have that data integration possible.
And data integrity. Now, but a question for you, like you mentioned, so we integrate between Procore and ACC on RFIs. The reason we can do that is the workflows are just more straight ahead. I have a question, you got an answer. But even when we've been looking at submittals, which is much more complex to pass that data, there are at least some data fields that could start that process right now. Is that fair? Like, you wouldn't be able to pass all the data because it's not a complete match.
Yeah.
But even assisting in, okay, this set of data we can write back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a different workflow process, but yeah, definitely there's an initial setup that we can use to kind of pass the data back and forth for sure.
And if you start there, then I think, industry players, the AECOMs, the Floors, the Jacobs of the world, can then put some pressure on the various underlying manufacturers, the CDEs, to going, you know what? We need another 5 data points and another 5 data points. That's the only way I can see progress moving forward. Because otherwise, it's what I was saying before, and you're boiling the ocean if you go for it.
Yes, and it would take years and years.
Right.
So I agree. And actually, I remember one project where the developer asked the maintenance and operations people, what kind of data do you need? What kind of information do you need to do your job in the future? And it was surprisingly small set of data. So, but
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not even getting that. That's my point. Because I was at some conference a couple of years ago, I won't name names, and everybody had breakout sessions of what they're going to do, and it was just squibbles on a board. And my comment was, can we get 5 data points, please? Because I'm just a pragmatic person. Right? I practically bring things together. It's just my nature. And that's what I found. It was sort of eye-opening to me, going, well, we did agree at least on some of these, so why don't we make that a standard to start? And I think that's part of the resistance in the industry. The industry is so used to, it's got such smart people building these incredibly complex things, that the notion of starting simply is somewhat anathema to the industry. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you agree with that culturally, or is it just too much of an open-ended statement to answer?
I think it's a good point. Like, overall, simplicity is what is needed, because we already have Kobe standard, and people can keep saying that it's too large and it's too hard to manage. It's not. But it's, people keep asking for the same data, or inventing additional data sets without really understanding or thinking about what's the use case of it, who is actually going to be the author of the data, who is going to be the end user of the data, and things get really mixed up because people tend to have their individual perspective into what data they need at what point in time. So when thinking about if someone is a product manufacturer, they need certain sets of data to actually produce what they then sell to the industry. But do everyone in the industry need the same sets of data as they do? Probably not. So like you said, Gigs, that we need to simplify and really focus on what is the core data that we actually need to have available at any point in time. And then, depending on what the perspective of individual is into the project and the product life cycle or the technical life cycle of the building itself, then they can add more to the data set that they are managing and using, but not forcing everyone else to the same thing.
Yeah,
So
overlapping Venn diagrams with a central
yes,
commonality.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that the Pareto principle is also valid here, so that 20% of the data covers 80% of the use cases. And whenever you do some software development, you know that when you start asking the users what kind of ideas they have, what kind of features they would like to have, you get some people are really vocal and they want something, but if you look at it from the perspective of the majority of users, it's a really it's the data set is really limited, and people are happy when there are not too many choices.
Yeah, no, it's the illusion of choice, as someone I know
Yeah.
used to say, and it's true. People like the idea of democracy; they just don't want too many people to vote for.
Yeah, but talking about if you think about modular construction, and I said that we have been doing it in Finland for, of course, it was more like panelized panel construction, concrete construction. But we developed standards in the 70s, and the standards allow any contractor to order the panels from any factory in Finland because everybody's using the same standards. So it if you're just using one factory standards, when they are their books are full, what can you? It will delay the process. So that's an example of just the industry coming together and saying we have to do this now because otherwise we are not able to build the amount of new apartments that was needed after the war in Finland. And typically, unfortunately, it's the crises that make people collaborate and come up with good ideas.
And that's
Hopefully
kind of
we
my
don't.
sorry.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't need a huge crisis to do that.
Yeah, there's plenty brewing out there. And yeah, on the modularization of the enterprise, that is the logical extension for me, Aarni, is that those standards that you reference established in Finland freed up the industry to work more efficiently and quickly. And if they did the same thing, if the industry took on the charge of doing the same thing as it relates to enterprise platforms, it would make the interchange of different platforms a lot easier. I mean, we have two prospective projects coming up for us. One is using P6 in Oracle, another one's using something else and something else, but the way we're going to approach it is the same. Right. And so what do you see the advantages of for the industry? Just being cognizant of time and the like. What should the industry do, just as a summary, to get to this more modular concept as it relates to their enterprise computing, what's required, and what are the advantages for the industry ultimately?
Maybe
why march toward this, basically, right?
Maybe Salla can start.
Yeah, it's from my perspective, I'd say that it enables organizations, the developers, investors to really do some cost engineering when they are designing their projects. So they don't go overboard just because they are planning to build something bigger than what they can afford for. So modularization enables to cost engineer. And then, like Aarni said, that if everyone is following the same standards, then you can pick and choose where you order your supplies and materials and products from. So then it enables the developers to value engineer who they buy their product from, and the value engineering perspective is into increasing the quality and not stripping cool things out from the project. And that way it enables developers and portfolio managers, owners, to really tackle the total cost of ownership. And that way they don't overinvest in their capex processes and undermine the operational expenses, but they can actually have the whole technical life cycle of their portfolio managed before anything is actually produced and built. And when thinking about digitalization, modular construction enables to build digitally first and then create the physical twin. And that way they can already plan for how to exchange the different products, how to lean in with retrofitting things and exchanging things, upgrading things over time. And that way it all boils down into the financial management and how much is spent, how many times do you pay for the same building over and over again during its life cycle.
And for me, it's the extension into the enterprise applications, right? That if you should be able to swap out your ERP, you should be able to swap out your CRM, you should be able to swap out your field modules, your change order systems without bringing the building down.
Exactly.
Yes, and I think that in general, this is one essential part of the more industrialized construction process that we definitely need in the future. And this is one essential building block of the digitalized building process.
And Shaili, any thoughts from you?
Nope, I think definitely great points that came here. But looking at the IT side, definitely we talked about it before, but starting to put some standards in place and definitely starting slow yet making progress and bringing all of these systems together to have that standardized architecture. I think that's a great first step.
Yeah, so that was our contention, folks, that this same revolution that's been ongoing and developing as it relates to modular construction, those concepts really would have great benefit being brought to the enterprise as it relates to the modular components of data and data systems. So if nobody else has any other comments, then with that, I bid everybody adieu. And look, really appreciate everybody coming out. Thank you, Aarni. I know it's late over there. And as always, Salla.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aarni, for joining us, and thank you, Joe, for inviting us.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun, guys.
It's been a pleasure, and it doesn't matter. I'm always happy how late it is, however late it is. I'm always happy to discuss these things with people who are clearly have some fantastic ideas.
Well, that's great to hear. I appreciate it, man. All right. Thank you, everybody. Talk to everybody out there next time.